Welcome to the last part of the Taylor Swift folklore cardigan tutorial. I can't believe that we're almost done with this series. It's been over a year in the making, so I'm glad that we are now onto finishing our cardigans and seaming everything together. First, we'll start attaching our sleeves. Of course, you should have both of your sleeves ready. You'll also need stitch markers or safety pins, your tapestry needle, scissors, and yarn. Before we seam the sleeves to the body, we are going to align the panels correctly. Lay your body piece flat and attach your sleeve from the start of the back armhole shaping to the front armhole shaping. It doesn't matter which side you start first because it's the same for both. Using stitch markers or safety pins, attach the sleeve to your body. Because this is a pretty big piece, attach the corners and center first and then fill in the gaps. We are going to sew the sleeves to the body panel using the invisible vertical seam. This is the same method we use to attach the shoulders, so check out the button band video for the full tutorial. This seam is done on the right side of your work, so align your panels accordingly. Once you're done with that, we will do the same thing on the other side. Ta-da! Both sleeves have been attached. The power of editing. Next, we will work on the star detailing. This isn't part of the Lion brand pattern, but I mean, it's not a folklore cardigan without its iconic stars. Out of all the crafting methods, my favorite is the look of crocheted stars, but I can't crochet, so I won't be doing that this time around. I'm sure there are some great tutorials of crochet or knitted stars online, so you can search up YouTube for those. Today, I decided to just use felt to make my stars. I found reference pictures of stars online because I cannot draw one freehanded for my life, and I put my phone to my cardigan to gauge the size of it. Once I'm happy with the size, I trace it on a piece of paper. Well, knowing me, it took a few tries, but I finally got my perfect star. If you're doing the same method as me and outlining it from your phone, a tip from me is to invert the colors on your phone. So it turns white into black and makes it easier for you to see the lines, especially if you're doing this in a bright place. Then I cut the star out and placed it on my felt. If you have enough felt to spare, I find it easier to cut a small piece that's slightly bigger than the star instead of cutting the star straight from the big piece of felt. But if you don't do it, that's fine as well. It's just a bit more difficult to get those precise lines for the star. Anyway, I also took some safety pins and pinned the paper to the felt so that the paper doesn't shift around when I'm cutting. Then I repeated the process another 5 more times to create 6 stars, 3 per sleeve. Long story short, I didn't really like how the stars turned out, so now I don't have any stars on my cardigan. I wish I sewed the plain black ones on, but now that everything's been sewed up, it's difficult to sew it on. So don't make the same mistake I did. Decide what stars you want on your cardigan, or don't if you don't want any, and sew them on before you sew the rest of your cardigan up, or else it will be impossible to get it on. Anyway, you can just use a sewing needle and thread to patch it up. Next, we'll work on sewing up the sides. I'm not sure what this seam is called, but I've been doing it from the start of my knitting journey and it hasn't failed me at all, so I'll show you how to do it. It's basically like a regular back and forth sewing stitch. For this, we will sew the panels together from the wrong side of our work. So turn it the other way around and then realign your panels again. Get all your loose ends out of the way and make sure that it's on the wrong side of the work as well. Again, before we get started, secure the panels together with stitch markers or safety pins. Use small pins around the underarm area because that's where things usually get a bit more messy. Thread your yarn into your tapestry needle and we'll start sewing. You can start wherever you want. For this tutorial, I'm just starting from the bottom ribbing, then working our way up to the sleeves. So for the sake of this tutorial, I will give directions like forward and backward. In this case, forward will mean toward the direction of the sleeve, and backward will be towards the lower ribbing. It doesn't matter whether the front panel or the back panel is the front or back of the work, just make sure that you're sewing it from the wrong side of your work. So when we flip it over to the right side, we cannot see the sewing lines. Insert your needle into the first stitch and leave a short tail at the end. Now go back into the front of where you are holding, about 1 cm from where you first inserted your needle. Now go backward about 0.5 cm from your first stitch. Then move forward about 1 cm. Go backward again about 0.5 cm from the second stitch. Next, move forward about 1 cm. That's basically how you sew your panels together. So on one side of your work, you will always be going back into the previous stitch, and on the opposite side, you will always be going forward into a new stitch. Now you can see we've formed this pretty seam line on the front of the work. Continue until you finish the whole edge and then do the same thing for the other side. Finally, we'll sew on our buttons. For this, you'll need a needle threader, a basic sewing needle with a larger eyelet like an embroidery needle, and your buttons of course. The pattern calls for 1¼ inch or 32mm buttons, but that was way too big for my cardigan, so I sized mine down to 20mm. You might have to change the size of your buttons accordingly to your cardigan. Then you'll also need yarn. You can choose whether you want to use your main color yarn or contrast color yarn. I just used my main color. First, we'll cut off a bit of yarn. You don't need a lot, so you can use scrap yarn if you want to. Then I split my strand into 4 pieces so that it'll fit into the embroidery needle. Be careful when separating the strands, it can get twisted easily and weaken the fibers. If your yarn is thinner, you might not need to separate it. Then we'll use the needle threader to thread the yarn into the embroidery needle. To use the needle threader, first thread your needle into the needle threader. Then insert your yarn into the needle threader into the small little hole. Pull the needle off the needle threader and the yarn will automatically be threaded into the embroidery needle for you. This might be a little time consuming because of the yarn, so be patient with this. I got a bit aggressive with it and my needle threader broke in half. But if you're still tugging and your yarn won't go in, you might have to separate the strands further. If you can't do that, you can also use embroidery thread instead of yarn. The color might not be the exact same as your work, but it'll still work. Embroidery thread is thicker than normal thread and will be able to hold the button better, in the case where your yarn can't be threaded through the needle. Align your cardigan so that the right panel of the button band is on top of the left panel. Put stitch markers where the button holes are. Put the stitch marker closer to the left side because when we place the button, it will be where the contrast color is. Check again that your alignment is correct, and finally we'll sew on the buttons. Place the button where the contrast colored yarn is. Then I just sewed my button using a cross stitch because I like the look of it, but you can also just sew it vertically or horizontally. To sew a cross stitch, insert your needle from the back of your work into any one of the holes. Remember to hold onto the button where you want it to be because it will move around. Leave a bit of yarn or thread at the back to secure it later. Then insert your needle into the hole diagonal from the hole you came out from. Next, from the back of your work, insert your needle into any of the other 2 remaining holes. Then go into the last hole. To make it more secure, I did it a second time in the same pattern direction. Then tie the strings at the back of your work. I tied mine double and cut off the excess. You don't have to weave these in, but you could if you wanted to. If your button only has 2 holes instead of 4, then you just do the same method but without the crisscross, so vertically or horizontally. Then I did the same thing again 2 more times for the other 2 buttons. My thread didn't come loose from my embroidery needle, so I just continued sewing. If you find that you don't have enough yarn or thread for the next button, you can always add more using the needle threader. Here is the final reveal. This cardigan was 1 year in the works with quite a few breaks in between when I got angry and irritated. Despite the minor setbacks, I love this cardigan so much. The fit is amazing and the variegated yarn is kind of growing on me. It also gives me Evermore vibes, so I think that's really fun. This cardigan is my second biggest knit project ever and I love it very much. I did make it myself, so obviously I'm a little biased, but anyway, this is the last tutorial in this series. If you have any other video requests for tutorials, let me know and I'll see what I can do. I may or may not have a few more videos lined up in this series that's not necessarily related to the tutorial portion, so stay tuned for that. For now, I'll be experimenting with a few different video ideas, so I'm excited to share this new journey with you. Thanks for sticking around and I'll see you in the next one.